Okay, welcome back. So how'd you go with creating your pacing script for the suggestions? Hopefully it went quite smoothly for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to create the suggestions. So the suggestions we're going to look at, we really want to cover off a number of elements that need to be present in every suggestion that we deliver. And so those elements are, firstly, it needs to be stated in the positive. It also needs to have present tense. You need to be able to repeat it. You want to use some variations from time to time. And you also want to make sure it's evocative. So you want to have some sort of emotional connection to the suggestions being given. So let's have a look at how to make sure it is positive. And this is one of the most important rules because the unconscious mind doesn't process negatives. And so you always want to refer to experiences or responses that are desirable. And you also want to avoid verbal negations. So to give you some insight to that, the unconscious mind doesn't process negatives. So if I was to say, don't think of a black cat, you have to think of a black cat to know that you didn't think of it. And so that's an example where the unconscious mind doesn't process negatives. So we never want to give a suggestion to our client that has some negative phraseology included in it. For example, you want to convert a negative phraseology into a positive. And so you'd ask something like, if you don't have, then what do you have instead? As an example, someone might say, I want to stop biting my fingernails. And so we can't actually give them a suggestion such as every day you won't bite your fingernails because the internal representation or the focus that happens unconsciously is still of biting fingernails because you need to see that activity in order to know what you're not going to do. And so unconsciously, you still focus on that activity. Now, if your client was to speak to you like that and said, I want you to give me a suggestion such as I won't bite my fingernails, well, you want to convert that to a positive. And so you'd ask, so if you aren't biting your fingernails, then what are you doing instead? And I know that can sound like a bit of a strange question, but it is useful to ask to ensure that you're getting information from your client in their model of the world. Now, of course, when you're writing a script, you typically don't have your client in front of you. And so you're just having to make a educated guess or an assessment as to what sort of wording is going to connect with most people. And so instead of giving someone a suggestion such as you won't bite your fingernails, the correct way of phrasing it in terms of a suggestion is to say you allow your fingernails to grow. And that's essentially what people want to happen, is they want their fingernails to grow. You might even change it slightly. You might say you allow your fingernails to grow faster, or you allow your fingernails to grow in a more healthy way, or you might add some sort of qualifier to the end of it if you choose to. And so as another example, when someone says, I feel shy, well, you can't give them a suggestion which would be you no longer feel shy. Instead, it would need to be something like you now feel confident and outgoing, because ultimately that is really what they want. They want to feel more confident and outgoing. So that covers off how to make sure that your suggestion is stated in the positive. And of course, like I said, if you can't think of what it is in the positive, ask yourself the question, if I don't have this, or if the client doesn't have this, then what would they have instead? And then the answers that you get from that question gives you some insight into what your suggestion should be phrased with. Okay, so let's look at present tense. So you always want to make sure that your suggestion is stated in present tense. So you can do that very easily by using the word such as now or you are. And so every day you now have more confidence and are outgoing. So the word now infers it's present tense, or you are outgoing and confident. Again, infers that it happens right now. Because for a few reasons, firstly, the client probably wants a result immediately. And so why should they not be able to have that result immediately? You also want to avoid future tense because it does promote a slight detachment or dissociation. So I don't feel like what it's like to have it right now because it's in a future moment. And I've been thinking about other things that happen in a future moment. They haven't happened yet. So to avoid that detachment and to avoid that dissociation, you want to use present tense. And what you also do is use future projection to deliver present tense suggestions. And so you can say it is now December 2015 and every day you now. So you can actually future project them Take them into a place in the future and talk about it as if they are actually there. So even though it may be a future moment, you want to talk about it in present tense still as best you can. Okay, let's go to making sure that it is repeatable, that it is concise and you can repeat it. And so you want to repeat suggestions for an accumulative effect. Now there is a balance to that, because if you repeat it too many times, it sometimes becomes a little bit less evocative, or it has less meaning to the client because they've heard it too many times at that point. So there is a bit of a balance. Now, on average, that balance is to repeat a suggestion approximately 3 times. And so what I do when I'm writing the script is I don't actually repeat the suggestion 3 times in the actual wording as I'm writing it. I will just put the word repeat in brackets at the end of the suggestion. And so it does leave it open to the practitioner's approach and what they prefer as to how many times they repeat it. But my encouragement to you is when writing a script is just put the words repeat at the end of each suggestion, just to give that added highlighting mark for the practitioner that's reading it to know, okay, that's what I need to repeat. That is an actual suggestion. Now, most practitioners will already understand that it is a suggestion, but just to clearly highlight it as well. Now, the next step we're going to look at is variation, and you want to vary suggestions around some common themes, and it helps to describe different aspects of the same idea. So, for example, if somebody's body wanted to heal faster, or they had some sort of healing that needed to be done in their body, as you can see, Bart's helped me out by writing a few suggestions on the blackboard, where he's written down every day you now heal faster and faster. Every day you now heal faster and faster. Every day you now heal faster and faster. And you can see that there's a variation to that. It's still a focused on healing, but it's slightly different. It's worded slightly different. And so every day your body performs at its optimum level. And for your body to perform at its optimum level, it needs to heal faster and faster, and it needs to be at an optimum level. And so you can start to help a client create a unconscious change, a specific unconscious change, by using a variation of suggestions that are really tackling that problem from different aspects. Okay. Now, to give you some further insight, this is sort of taking your understanding a little bit deeper now. And this is how you start to create even more detailed suggestions. You can use the ABC model of cognitive behavioral therapy, the CBT, to structure your suggestions. And CBT has this model that infers that there's an activation behind a behavior. So there's something that triggers it. There's then the actual behavior, so the physical behavior that other people can see. And then there's the consequences of that behavior. So how does it make you feel? What sort of thoughts does it bring up? And so this is starting to look at the structure or the construct of creating cognitive behavioral variation in the suggestions that you're using. So to go a little bit deeper with that, for example, if someone had a problem with back pain, well, the activation, so the trigger for that back pain might be them bending over. And so we can start to think about some suggestions that are going to help them with the movement of bending over. The behavior is that they have restricted movement. So the behavior that anyone could witness is that person sort of not moving freely with their back, being very rigid in their movements. And so again, we can give some suggestions that are going to help them handle that restricted movement or that behavior. And then the consequences of having back pain, having restricted movement, and being triggered by bending over is the consequences that they avoid using their back. And so again, you may give some suggestions that really handle those sorts of consequences and help them use their back more and more, and find that they're using their back freely and easily and effortlessly. And every time they use their back, you now feel ultimate comfort in your body. And so you want to start to give some suggestions that are going to handle the activation or the trigger. It's going to handle the behavior that's taking place, but also is going to handle the consequences as well. And so this structure really does help you come up with a large number of suggestions that are really going to go after that problem that the client's experiencing. So again, just very quickly at a higher level, you have the problem, which is back pain, the activation, which is bending over to pick things up. The behavior is that they move around very stiff and rigid, and the consequences are that they avoid exercise or any activity that actively uses back or inner core muscles. And so some suggestions you could give them using that same ABC model is, for the activation, anytime you bend over and pick up things from the ground, you now do so easily and effortlessly, feeling very comfortable and strong. The behavior, to handle the behavior, you might say something like, with every passing day, you now move freely and comfortably. This feeling of comfort and flexibility increases more and more every day. And for the consequences, you might use a suggestion such as, you now find yourself becoming more aware of the amazing strength that you're developing in your back and other areas of your body, knowing that the more you use a part of your body, the stronger and more flexible it becomes. Now, if you really want to make that more concise, you could. Now, that final one was, relatively long, so you could sort of simplify it, and you might even break it up into 2 or 3 suggestions if you really want to make it short and sharp and to the point. So you now find yourself becoming more aware of the amazing strength that you have in your back. Every day you're becoming more aware of the amazing strength you have in your back. Every day you're now developing even more strength in other areas of your body. Every day you're now developing even more strength in other areas of your body. Every day your body's now stronger and more flexible. Every day your body is now more stronger and more flexible. And so that just goes to show you can start to break it up into smaller bite-sized chunks if you choose to. And finally, we want to make sure that it's evocative. We want to make sure that there's some sort of meaning and it brings feelings and images to mind. That's really what helps our client create the change. We need our client to be emotionally invested in getting this outcome. We can't force changes upon our client. The client is the one that creates the changes for themselves. And the one thing that really locks those changes in place, it's almost like the concrete for the foundations of change that we're creating, is the emotion. So if they can associate some strong positive emotions to these suggestions, then they have a greater impact at the unconscious level. And so, as it says there, abstract suggestions should be preceded by more specific suggestions. And so you want to make sure that if you are going to use some abstract suggestions, that you also use some more specific suggestions as well, just to make sure that their client really can deeply associate to the suggestions that you're giving them. Okay, time for the next exercise. Okay, so this time what I'd like you to do is choose a problem or topic, and hopefully you've already got one from all the other previous exercises. I want you to create 5 direct suggestions that will help this problem or topic. And then what I want you to do is create 2 cognitive behavioral variant suggestions. So 2 suggestions that fit the ABC model. So 2 suggestions that handle the activation or the trigger, 2 suggestions that handle the behavior, and then 2 suggestions that handle the consequence of that particular problem. And then when you're done, move on to the next module. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.